Hey, this is Tyler. I wanted to make a video response to Crispy's video on maps. Who makes them? Do you need them? What have you? Because I thought that was interesting because I used to be one of the guys, that did it sort of in the old school fashion because nobody really, you just read a tabletop RPG. They usually don't teach you how to actually play an RPG. They just teach you how to play the mechanics of the game. That Watsy loves selling any scant GM advice they do give separately via things like the DM's guide. So if you just run through the core rulebook, you basically just got a board game. And so I loved making maps on grid paper, stuff like that, doing basically small scale skirmish games where you have a bunch of people playing individual characters, because that's how most people run their tabletops. And I was no different when I first started out. But I noticed as I got more and more into the role playing of it, I noticed you don't really need to give your players the maps, and you don't need to have you don't even need to really have a map yourself as a GM. You do need to know where stuff is, obviously, but you don't need to have like a drawn out, nice looking map. What I mean by that is I might have just a description, There's a big antechamber that leads down a long hallway. There's some medium sized rooms on the left and right. That way I'm not, and I'll just say medium sized. That way, whenever walk into a room, the players aren't going, uh, how long is it? And it's like, okay, you have exactly measured that it's 30 feet wide by 20 foot. Because whenever a GM does something like that and they know, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they go, okay, you walk into a room that's 30 foot long by 25 foot wide by 15 foot high. It's like, okay, maybe I've got a character that's very good at math and has a really good grasp. Most people don't. That they couldn't tell you down to the foot how wide exactly a room is. They would need to measure it out. So maybe a rough estimate if they try to line it up, but you know and part of what helps avoid this is I make sure my players know that any vagueness on my part is for them to gain, right? Because their characters are the ones seeing the world. It wouldn't make sense for them to go, "Oh, uh is there a desk in this office space?" And I go, "No." Because, the character's not blindfolded looking around for a desk. They just see what's in the room. They would immediately see, yeah, there's a desk in here. So let your players be their own character's eyes. Sometimes we talk about the GM is supposed to be the senses of the player character, but that's only partially true, right? Sometimes, either because we just don't think it's a necessary detail or because we forgot to explain it, we'll leave some detail out on accident. And or on purpose. I'll get to that. But you leave some detail out. Okay, now the player characters can fill it in. They're not gonna, they've been taken prisoner or whatever, and they walk around. They don't just find a fully loaded handgun on a counter, unless they're really, really lucky and some very incompetent cop left it there. But that's not something they just get for free. That would have to look for that. Maybe make if you have a luck mechanic, or if you just want to use a flat die roll with whatever your mechanic is. You could handle it that way. But sometimes we also as GMs don't want to give the players tons of information, right? Like I said, you're not going to instantly ascertain the exact architectural dimensions of this room. Especially, you got like an arched ceiling. You can measure what it is at the arches and what it is at the top of the ceiling. No, I don't think so. Um, so yeah, we don't want to just, your players open the door and you start describing in gross detail. Uh, the floor construction appears to be a sort of moss covered flagstone, and then as you go up against the walls, there are some newer and smaller stones placed where lichen has begun growing. Water drips from the ceiling. There's a grate 15 foot off the ground and placed 5 foot offset into the left side of the ceiling. At the back is, and you're just describing for, you're just going on and on and on and on and on, and the player characters don't get or the players, they're not getting to play the game, right? Especially if they're nice and they don't want to interrupt you, because even, I always again tell my players, interrupt me whenever you want. But usually if you're still describing, even if it's not about being rude, they want to get all of the detail because they assume it's important. But is it important that the grate is exactly 5 feet offset to the left? No, it's important that there's a grate in the ceiling. Is it important that the exact kind of lichen or moss that's coating the stones? No, you could just say the stones are slippery. Or, it looks like it's been here for a while. And then all of the characters, the players can assume, what that looks like. Oh, it's slippery. I'm gonna throw down some sawdust. That way I don't slip in case we have to fight in this room later. I'm gonna scrape off some of the moss, look at it, see if it's some kind of like poison and we need to be wearing masks or what have you. And that can be a way they roll a knowledge check. I want to make a video on knowledge check separately. But as far as making the map specifically, and not just how it's handled behind the screen, if I do have a traditional like grid paper map or something that's drawn and not just described, I will do one of two things. If the characters in the world have a map, I'll give them the map. I'll just and that can be a fun way of, maybe the map that they bought is unreliable. It's not from a great map maker. Map making is a skill. So I would likewise, use the character's abilities. If, a character is proficient in cartography, or architecture or something like that, I would give them a benefit. I would, as the GM, correct their map because they, as a human being on the material plane, might not be as good at cartography as their character is. So to represent that their character is better at cartography as they're doing the map, I might have them make me a cartography check. I glance over and go, okay, here's the correct bit of, you could do it by the whole dungeon, you could do it by stretches of the dungeon, you could do it room by room. I think that would be too much rolling, but make it more and more accurate because look at like medieval and Renaissance maps. Some of them are incomprehensible. They're useless. They're super crude, and a lot of them are not meant to be practical maps. They're meant to be political or spiritual maps. Lots of them are showing like the division of where astrologically they think heaven is. Maybe that's something to think about, something to look into in your like planar adventures with higher fantasy systems. What else was I going to say? So yeah, if the characters have a map in the game world, or if the characters are making a map in the game world and they're good at it, then that's fine. But if they're making the map themselves, yeah, it's fine for it to be crude and off because that happens in the real world. Look at some old maps of England, and they're just sort of like, there's a river here, and it eventually goes over here, and they just sort of tell you where like the beginning point and the end point are, and in between is kind of that river takes you to your destination eventually. So, but also stuff may have changed. How old is the map that they've received? If they get a really old map that's like, oh yeah, there's a road that goes here. Maybe they go along the road and they find that, they have to clear out a bunch of fallen brush because that road hasn't been used in 50 years or something. or the townsfolk, or just farmers nearby have taken stones to build their houses out of the road, so you can't take a wagon there. You get a wagon halfway to your destination, and now you have to decide, man, are we going to spend a bunch of time trying to get our wagon over this crappy road? And, maybe by the time we're there, our backs are all broken and nobody's in really good physical shape to do any, dungeon delving or adventuring work. Or do we cut our supplies? Do we try to stop at a town, sell off all our supplies in the wagon, and travel lighter on horseback? Because horses are going to be able to travel a rough road much better than a wagon is. Because you have to remember, wagons didn't have suspension. It's just two wheels on a solid axle. So every bump you're going over is going all crazy. And that's more worldly maps, But yeah, I don't think it's particularly important who's doing it. These are just some ideas that I haven't really heard anybody talking about, sort of informed by my historical study as well as how I like game mastering. Right, I like the character skills to matter and things. So if I did have my players making the map, I wouldn't want to punish them for their skill in map making. And maybe that's an idea, I don't think I've seen a game where cartography is a skill, but maybe if you were going to handle things like that, maybe that's something to do, right? Instead of just exploring the dungeon, in many D20 systems, just perception check, perception check, perception check. Maybe you have this cartography skill so that you can more easily remember things. Maybe you don't even need the player to start writing down the map. Maybe you just, they roll a cartography skill and they try to remember, oh, there's a passageway down back into the left here. And so if they're trying to run away from some trap or something that they've opened, under duress, they get a little bit of extra time to think, okay, where do we need to go to avoid dead ends? Because I've been through here before. That way it's not up to the player to stare at the map and go, okay, well, if we take a left... Meanwhile, there's a giant boulder coming after them. No, you just... D20, okay, I take the shortest, easiest path back that I remember. Or, whatever your die mechanic is. It doesn't have to be a D20. But, make a roll and add your cartography skill or what have you. That way your players are... The character is the character. The player isn't punished for misremembering something. Yeah, let me know if any of that sounds interesting. Sorry for the late response. Crispy, I said to make the video yesterday and I totally did not. But yeah, I'll see ya.